The room was already silent when Elena Carter walked in. 20 people sat around the long conference table. Nobody looked at her. Her hospital badge hung from her blue scrubs. Her hands were steady. She had no idea that in less than 10 minutes, she would lose her job. The hospital director, Richard Hale, sat at the end of the table. A thick folder lay in front of him. Beside it was a termination letter. Hale looked at Elena. "Sit down." Elena pulled out the chair. She sat. Hale opened the folder. "You were involved in the treatment of Michael Reeves 3 nights ago." "Yes. You entered a restricted treatment area without authorization." "I was called there." "By whom?" "Dr. Morgan." Hale glanced toward the senior doctor sitting across the room. Dr. Morgan lowered his eyes. Hale turned another page. "You administered medication without waiting for approval." He was crashing. "That isn't what the report says." Elena looked at the folder. "Then the report is wrong." A few people shifted in their chairs. Hale leaned back. "You understand what you're accusing us of?" "I'm saying what happened. You were saying the hospital's official record is false." Elena looked directly at him. "Yes." Nobody spoke. Hale slowly closed the folder. Then he pushed a single sheet of paper across the table. "Your employment is terminated." Elena looked down. Her name was printed at the top. Below it were several accusations. Protocol violation, unauthorized treatment, professional misconduct, patient endangerment. She read every line. Then she looked back at Hale. "I won't sign it." Hale's expression barely moved. "You don't have a choice." "I do. You can sign the document and leave quietly." Elena pushed the paper back. "Or..." Hale leaned forward. "Or security walks you out." Elena stayed calm. "Then call security." The room became even quieter. Hale studied her face. Most employees would have apologized by now. Some would have begged. Elena didn't either. She simply sat there. Hale picked up the termination letter. "You've worked here for 11 years. "Yes." "You know what happens when a nurse refuses a direct order." "I know what happens when a nurse takes responsibility for a patient." Hale's jaw tightened. Dr. Morgan finally spoke. "Elena, this isn't helping." She looked at him. "You were there." He said nothing. "You saw his blood pressure." Still nothing. "You saw his oxygen level." Dr. Morgan stared at the table. Elena's voice became quieter. "You know I was right." Hale stood. "Enough." He pressed a button on the phone beside him. 2 security officers entered. Elena looked around the room one last time. Some nurses avoided her eyes. One young nurse looked like she wanted to say something. She didn't. Elena stood. She removed her hospital badge. For a second, she held it in her hand. Then she placed it on the table. Hale watched her. "You should have signed." Elena looked at him. "I won't put my name on a lie." She turned toward the door, then stopped. She looked back at the folder. "Check the patient record." Hale said nothing. Elena continued. "Not the copy on your desk." Her eyes moved to the computer. The original. Hale's face changed. Only for a second. But Elena noticed. She walked out. The doors closed behind her. Outside the conference room, the hallway was busy. Nurses moved between rooms. Doctors hurried past. Monitors beeped behind closed doors. Nobody knew she had just been fired. Elena walked toward the elevators. Her shoes sounded against the floor. One step, then another. She pressed the button. The elevator doors opened. Before she stepped inside, she heard someone behind her. "Elena." She turned. It was Sarah, one of the younger nurses. Sarah looked nervous. She glanced toward the conference room, then back at Elena. "They changed it." Elena froze. "Change what?" "The time." "What time?" Sarah swallowed. "The medication record." Elena stared at her. Sarah lowered her voice. "It doesn't show what you gave him anymore." Elena's face stayed calm, but her eyes changed. "Who changed it?" Sarah looked toward the hallway. "I don't know." "You do." Sarah shook her head. "I can't." The elevator doors began to close. Elena stepped inside. Sarah whispered one final sentence. "They're trying to make it look like you caused the emergency." The doors shut. Elena stood alone in the elevator. For 11 years, she had trusted that hospital. She had worked night shifts. She had stayed after hours. She had held patients' hands when their families weren't there. And now someone had changed a medical record to make her look responsible for something she had prevented. The elevator reached the ground floor. Elena walked through the lobby. She pushed open the glass doors. Cold evening air hit her face. She stopped on the sidewalk. Across the street sat a black SUV. Its engine was running. The windows were dark. Elena looked at it. The SUV did not move. Then her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered. Hello? For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then a man's voice came through. Are you Elena Carter? Who is this? You were fired today. Elena looked back at the hospital. Who are you? The man's voice became quieter. Someone who knows what really happened to that patient. Elena said nothing. The man continued. You need to listen carefully. She looked across the street again. The black SUV was still there. Your hospital didn't fire you because of a mistake. Elena's grip tightened around the phone. Then why? A pause. Then the man said something that made her stop breathing for a second. Because you saved the wrong man's life. The call ended. Elena stood frozen on the sidewalk. The black SUV slowly pulled away. And for the first time that evening, she wondered who had been watching her all day. Elena did not move. The black SUV disappeared around the corner. She kept staring at the empty street. Because you saved the wrong man's life. The words stayed in her head. She replayed them. Again. And again. Then her phone vibrated. Same unknown number. Elena looked at the screen. This time, she answered immediately. Who are you? The same voice replied. Go somewhere private. Tell me who you are first. You have about 10 minutes. Elena looked toward the hospital entrance. 10 minutes for what? Before someone realizes you still have the information. Elena's expression hardened. I don't have anything. You have more than you think. The call ended. Elena stood there for another second. Then she walked. She didn't go home. She crossed the street and entered a small coffee shop 2 blocks from the hospital. She chose a table near the back. No windows. No one sitting nearby. She placed her phone on the table. 5 minutes passed. Nothing. Then it rang. She answered. Talk. The man said. Do you remember a patient from 4 years ago? Elena frowned. I've treated thousands of patients. This one came in late at night. That's not enough. He was unconscious. Elena looked down. Was he military? Silence. That was her answer. Elena leaned back. Who are you? The man ignored the question. He had a deep wound near his ribs. Elena's eyes narrowed. She remembered. A young man had been brought into the emergency room just after midnight. No family. No identification. 2 men had carried him inside. They had said almost nothing. The patient was barely breathing. His blood pressure was falling. His clothes were soaked with blood. The emergency team had worked for nearly an hour. Elena had been the nurse assigned to him. She remembered every detail. The cold skin. The weak pulse. The monitor screaming. The doctor ordering more blood. And the moment when the patient's heart stopped. Elena had been the one who noticed the change first. She had called for help. Then she had made a decision. A decision nobody had authorized. A decision that kept the man alive. His name was Daniel, Elena said. The voice went quiet. How do you know that? He told me. He was unconscious. Not when he woke up. Elena remembered that morning. The patient had opened his eyes for only a few seconds. He had looked at her. Then he had whispered one word. Daniel. That was all. The hospital records listed him as John Doe. Elena had never understood why. The voice on the phone said, his real name is Daniel Cross. Elena stared at the table. Where is he now? Alive. Where? I can't tell you. Why? Because there are people who still want him quiet. Elena looked toward the coffee shop entrance. A man walked inside. She watched him. He ordered coffee, then sat near the door. The caller continued. You saved Daniel Cross's life. Elena whispered. Then why did the hospital fire me? Because someone changed what happened that night. Who? We're trying to find out. We. Another pause. Military investigators. Elena's heart began beating faster. What was Daniel doing at my hospital? He was brought there after an operation. What kind of operation? I can't discuss that. Then why call me? Because you were the last person to see the original medical record. Elena looked down at her hands. I haven't seen that file in years. You saw it. I treated the patient. You also wrote something in the margin. Elena froze. She remembered the chart. There had been a handwritten note. She had written it because something bothered her. The patient's injuries didn't match the story they had been given. She had written a simple question. How did he get these injuries? The next morning, the note was gone. Elena had assumed someone had removed it for privacy reasons. Now she wasn't so sure. The man on the phone said, "You were never supposed to remember that." Elena looked toward the door again. The man who had ordered coffee was no longer sitting there. His chair was empty. Her stomach tightened. "Where did you go?" "I'm still here." "No. I mean the man who was sitting by the door." The voice became serious. "Leave the coffee shop." Elena stood. "Why?" "Now." She grabbed her bag. She walked toward the back exit instead of the front. The door opened into a narrow alley. She stepped outside. Nobody followed. She kept walking until she reached her car. She unlocked it. Before getting inside, she looked around. Empty street. No black SUV. No stranger. Nothing. She started the engine. Her phone rang again. This time, the caller spoke before she could say anything. "Elena." "Yes. I need you to remember something." "What?" "The night Daniel came into the hospital, you weren't the only person who knew who he was." Elena stared through the windshield. "Who else?" "Someone inside the hospital." "Who?" The line went silent. Elena waited. Then the man said, "That's the person who changed your record." The call ended. Elena lowered the phone. Her mind went back to the hospital, to the conference room, to Dr. Morgan, to Richard Hale, to Sarah. Then she remembered something she had not thought about in years. The night Daniel arrived, there had been one man standing outside his room. A man who had never introduced himself. A man who had told Elena not to ask questions. She had forgotten his face, but she remembered his voice. Elena reached for her car keys, then stopped. She looked at the hospital in the distance. Someone inside that building had known Daniel's identity. Someone had known what Elena had done. And someone had waited 4 years to erase the evidence. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text message appeared. No number. Just 6 words. "He's coming to see you tonight." Elena stared at the screen. She typed one question. "Who is he?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. They appeared again. A reply finally came. "You already know him." Elena looked up, and suddenly, she remembered the face of the wounded man who had once opened his eyes on her hospital bed. Richard Hale arrived at the hospital before sunrise. He walked through the main entrance without slowing down. 2 lawyers followed him. A hospital administrator walked beside them, holding a tablet. Nobody stopped Hale. Nobody ever did. He owned 3 private clinics in the city. He sat on the hospital board. He had donated millions of dollars to medical programs. His name was on one of the hospital's newest wings. People knew what that meant. Hale was not just another board member. He had influence, and he knew it. By 8 in the morning, the hospital conference room was full again. Elena was not there, but her name was. Hale placed a printed report on the table. "This is the incident report." The hospital director nodded. "Yes." "And this is the security footage?" "Yes." Hale turned toward Dr. Morgan. "You reviewed both?" Morgan nodded. "Several times." "And the conclusion?" Morgan hesitated. "The nurse violated procedure." Hale leaned back. "Good." The words sounded almost casual. Across the table, a legal advisor opened a folder. "The patient's family is demanding answers." Hale looked at him. "They don't want answers." He paused. "They want someone to blame." Nobody challenged him. The administrator placed a tablet on the table. Security footage began playing. A hallway appeared on the screen. A timestamp showed 11:43 p.m. Elena walked into a restricted treatment area. The footage ended. Hale looked around the room. "That's enough." The administrator stopped the video. "There." Hale pointed at the screen. "That's the moment she broke protocol." Dr. Morgan looked uncomfortable. "But there was an emergency." Hale turned toward him. "Doctor, the question is not whether there was an emergency." Morgan stayed quiet. "The question is whether she followed procedure." "Not exactly." Hale's expression hardened. "Then perhaps you should explain why she was allowed to make that decision." Morgan lowered his eyes. I wasn't in the room. Exactly. Hale closed the folder. Then you cannot defend her. A silence followed. The administrator looked at the clock. Should we notify the board? Already done. Hale stood. By noon, this will be finished. But it wasn't, because at 8:17 a.m., Elena walked into the hospital. She had no badge, no uniform. She carried a brown envelope. The security guard at the entrance stepped in front of her. You can't enter. I'm here for my personal belongings. You need authorization. Elena looked at him. Call the administration. The guard picked up the phone. 30 seconds later, Richard Hale appeared in the lobby. He looked almost pleased to see her. Elena. She held up the envelope. I want my things. You can have them delivered. No. Hale smiled. You don't trust us? Elena looked directly at him. Not anymore. The smile disappeared. Hale stepped closer. You should be careful with accusations. I'm careful with facts. Facts. He glanced at the envelope. Is that what you think you have? Elena said nothing. Hale lowered his voice. You made a serious mistake. No. She looked at him. I made a decision that kept a patient alive. Hale's eyes hardened. And then you made another mistake. Which was? You challenged the hospital. Elena looked around the lobby. Patients sat in chairs. Nurses moved through the entrance. A receptionist watched them. Elena spoke quietly. I challenged a false record. Hale leaned closer. You have no idea how dangerous that accusation is. Elena didn't move. Then prove me wrong. For the first time, Hale had no immediate answer. A phone rang behind him. He ignored it. Elena noticed. Then the hospital administrator appeared. Mr. Hale. He turned. What? We have a problem. What problem? The patient file. Hale's face changed. Elena noticed that too. The administrator looked at her. Then at Hale. Someone requested the original record. Hale's voice became cold. Who? We don't know. When? Last night. Elena stepped closer. Who has access? The administrator didn't answer. Hale looked at Elena. You need to leave. Elena held his gaze. Who requested the file? That's none of your business. It is if my name is in it. Hale said nothing. Elena turned toward the exit. Then she stopped. One more thing. Hale waited. The security footage you showed the board. What about it? The timestamp is wrong. Hale's eyes narrowed. How would you know? Because I was there. She walked away. Hale watched her leave. The administrator whispered, she knows. Hale answered without looking at him. Then make sure she knows nothing else. Across town, Elena sat inside her car. The brown envelope was on the passenger seat. Inside were her personal items. A photograph, 2 pens, a small notebook, and a copy of the termination report. She opened the report again. She read the accusation about unauthorized treatment. Then she read the time, 11:43 p.m. Elena shook her head. No. She opened her phone. She had taken a photograph of the patient's monitor that night. Not because she expected trouble, because she had been documenting his condition. She opened the picture. 11:18 p.m. The patient was already in critical condition. She checked another photograph. 11:27. Another. 11:35. The monitor showed his blood pressure dropping. Then she found the final photograph. 11:41. 2 minutes before the hospital claimed she entered the restricted area. Elena stared at the screen. She knew exactly where she had been at 11:41. She had been standing beside the patient's bed. The security footage said something else. Someone had changed the timeline. She opened the termination report again. Then she noticed something. The signature at the bottom of the medical review wasn't Dr. Morgan's usual signature. Elena zoomed in. She knew that signature. Not because she had seen it recently. Because she had seen it 4 years earlier. On Daniel's original patient file. Her breathing slowed. The same handwriting. The same initials. Someone had been connected to both cases. Her phone rang. Sarah. Elena answered. Sarah. Don't talk. Elena frowned. What happened? I found something. What? Someone accessed the old records last night. Who? Sarah's voice dropped. I saw the name. Elena waited. Richard Hale. Elena's eyes moved to the termination report. Sarah continued. But that's not the worst part. What is? The file wasn't open from his office. Elena sat up. Then where? Sarah took a breath. From the restricted medical archive. Elena looked toward the hospital in the distance. Who has access to that room? Sarah didn't answer. Sarah, I can't tell you over the phone. Then tell me where to meet you. Sarah hesitated. Tonight. Where? The old records room. Elena looked at the clock. After midnight. Yes. The call ended. Elena stared at her phone. Then she looked again at the termination report. Richard Hale's name was not on it. But someone had signed a medical review using the same handwriting found on Daniel Cross's old file. Someone who had access to the restricted archive. Someone who had been close enough to alter the record. And someone who had a reason to make Elena look guilty. That evening, Richard Hale stood alone in his office. His phone rang. He answered. Yes. A man's voice came through. She knows about the original file. Hale looked out through the glass wall. How much? Enough to become a problem. Hale's expression hardened. Then don't let her reach it. He ended the call. On his desk sat a single photograph. A younger Elena, standing beside a hospital bed. And behind her, barely visible in the photograph, was the man who had once been listed as John Doe. Daniel Cross. Hale picked up the photograph, then turned it face down, because 4 years ago, Daniel Cross had entered that hospital as a dying stranger. And Richard Hale had been there when he arrived at 11:47 p.m. Elena parked 2 blocks from the hospital. She turned off the engine. The building stood in front of her, bright against the dark sky. Most of the windows were black. Only the emergency department was still fully lit. Elena checked her phone. No message from Sarah. She waited another minute. Then her phone buzzed. Back entrance. 5 minutes. Come alone. Elena stepped out of the car. She walked toward the hospital. Every few seconds, she looked behind her. The parking lot was almost empty. A delivery truck sat near the loading dock. No security guard was visible. She reached the back entrance. The door opened before she touched it. Sarah stood inside. Her face was pale. You came. You called me. Sarah locked the door. Keep your voice down. Elena looked at her. What did you find? Sarah glanced toward the hallway. Not here. They walked through the service corridor. The hospital sounded different at night. No visitors. No crowded waiting room. Only distant machines. Footsteps. Air vents. Sarah stopped beside a gray metal door. The words Medical Archive were printed above it. She pulled out a keycard. The door unlocked. Elena followed her inside. Rows of shelves filled the room. Old files. Old equipment. Boxes stacked almost to the ceiling. Sarah shut the door. Then she whispered, Look. She pointed toward a computer. A file was open on the screen. Elena stepped closer. The patient's name appeared at the top. John Doe. Admission 4 years ago. Elena stared at it. That's him. Sarah nodded. I found it yesterday. What did you find? Sarah clicked on the file. The screen showed the original admission notes. Elena read them, then stopped. That's not what the hospital record says. I know. The official report had described Daniel as suffering from a simple penetrating injury. The original file said something else. Multiple wounds. Severe blood loss. Signs of blunt force trauma. Possible internal bleeding. Elena scrolled down. Then she saw her own note. Her handwriting. Her words. Patient condition inconsistent with reported incident. Recommend further investigation. Elena stared at the screen. I wrote this. I know. I thought they removed it. They did. Sarah clicked another file. The note had been deleted from the official record. But someone had kept a scanned copy. Elena looked at Sarah. Why? I don't know. She clicked again. A second document appeared. Elena's eyes narrowed. It was a medication record. The dosage she had given Daniel was listed. She compared it with the current hospital record. The numbers were different. They changed this too. Sarah nodded. 3 times. Elena's voice became quieter. Why would anyone change a medication record? Sarah looked at her. Because the original treatment worked. Elena looked back at the screen. What? The medication you gave him. Sarah pointed to the original file. It wasn't supposed to be used without authorization. Elena remembered that night. Daniel's heart rate had dropped. The doctor had been stuck in another emergency. There was no time. She had made the decision. She had given him the medication. His condition stabilized. He would have died. Sarah nodded. That's what I thought. Elena scrolled further. Then she stopped. There was another document. A transfer authorization. It had been signed the morning after Daniel survived. The name at the bottom was Richard Hale. Elena stared at it. Hale wasn't just a board member. Sarah shook her head. No. Then what was he doing here? I don't know. Elena opened the document. It showed that Daniel had been transferred to a private facility. No family notification. No public record. No explanation. Elena whispered, "Where did they take him?" Sarah looked at the screen. That's the problem. The destination had been blacked out. Someone had deliberately removed it. Elena stood. "We need a copy." Sarah nodded. "I already made one." She pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. Elena took it. "Anything else?" Sarah hesitated. "Yes." "What?" "I found the access log." She opened another screen. The archive system showed every person who had accessed Daniel's file. For years ago. Then again last night. Elena looked at the list. Her own name appeared. Then Dr. Morgan. Then Richard Hale. But one name appeared repeatedly. A person Elena did not recognize. "Who is that?" Sarah shook her head. "That's what scared me." "Why?" "Because that person isn't a doctor." Elena looked at the job title. Administrative Security Consultant. "What's his name?" Sarah clicked the profile. The screen loaded. Then froze. The name disappeared. Sarah tried again. Nothing. The system is blocking it. Elena stepped closer. "Can you access the backup?" "I tried." A noise came from the hallway. Both women froze. Footsteps. Slow. Coming toward the archive room. Sarah shut off the monitor. The room went dark. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Elena held the flash drive tightly. Someone tried the handle. Sarah covered her mouth. The handle moved again. Then stopped. A voice came from the other side. "Sarah?" Sarah looked at Elena. It was the hospital administrator. "Open the door." Neither woman moved. The administrator tried again. "I know you're in there." Sarah whispered, "What do we do?" Elena looked around. Rows of files. One door. No windows. The handle moved again. Then Elena noticed something. A narrow service door at the back of the archive. She pointed. Sarah nodded. They moved silently. The service door opened into a maintenance corridor. They slipped through. Sarah closed it behind them. The administrator entered the archive seconds later. Elena and Sarah hurried down the corridor. They didn't stop until they reached a stairwell. Sarah was breathing hard. "He knows." Elena looked at her. Yes. They descended one floor. Then another. Sarah stopped. "What now?" Elena looked at the flash drive in her hand. "Now we find out what they're hiding." She reached into her bag and pulled out her laptop. They sat on the stairs. Elena connected the drive. A folder opened. Most of the files were medical records. One folder had no name. Elena opened it. Inside was a single scanned document. A photograph appeared. It showed Daniel lying unconscious in a hospital bed. Elena recognized the room immediately. But something else caught her attention. Standing beside Daniel was Richard Hale. And standing beside Hale was the same man whose name had disappeared from the access log. Elena zoomed in. She saw the man's face. Then she stopped. She knew him. Not from the hospital. From 4 years ago. He had been standing outside Daniel's room that night. The man who had told her not to ask questions. Sarah looked at her. "Who is he?" Elena didn't answer. She opened the document beneath the photograph. It contained one sentence. Patient must not be allowed to identify personnel involved. Below it was a signature. Not Richard Hale's. Not Dr. Morgan's. Someone else's. Elena recognized the handwriting immediately. The same handwriting was on her termination review. The same handwriting had appeared on Daniel's original file. She stared at the signature. Then Sarah whispered, "Elena." "What?" "The file has a date." Elena looked. It was dated 4 years ago. But the document had been modified yesterday. Elena slowly closed the laptop. Someone had accessed the original file after she was fired. Someone was still trying to erase the evidence. And now they knew Elena had found it. She stood. "We have to leave." Sarah grabbed her arm. Why? Elena looked toward the stairwell door. Because they didn't erase this file. Sarah stared at her. Why would they leave it? Elena's voice dropped. Maybe they wanted us to find it. A loud metallic sound echoed from the floor above. Both women looked up. Another sound followed. A door closing. Then footsteps. Someone was coming down the stairs. Elena grabbed the laptop. Sarah turned off the light. They stood in complete darkness. The footsteps came closer. One floor. Then another. Elena held her breath. A shadow appeared beneath the stairwell door. Then a hand reached for the handle. The door began to open. And Elena heard a man's voice. Ms. Carter. She knew that voice. It was the same man who had warned her 4 years ago. And this time, he wasn't calling to tell her to stay quiet. The stairwell door opened. Elena stood in the darkness. Sarah was behind her. Neither woman moved. The man on the other side stepped inside. He was wearing a dark jacket. No hospital badge. No identification. Just a calm expression. He looked at Elena. You found the file. Elena tightened her grip around the laptop. Who are you? The man closed the door. You already know. I know your face. That's enough. Sarah stepped forward. You followed us. The man looked at her. No. He reached into his jacket. Sarah moved back. Elena raised her hand. Don't. The man stopped. Then he slowly pulled out a wallet. He opened it. Inside was a government identification card. Elena couldn't read the details in the darkness, but she saw the seal. The man lowered the card. I'm not here to hurt you. Then why are you here? Because you're looking at something you don't understand. Elena looked at the laptop. Then explain it. The man studied her. Not here. He pointed toward the stairs. Come with me. Elena didn't move. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. The answer surprised her. The man continued. Trust the evidence. He opened the stairwell door. That's all you have left. He walked away. Elena looked at Sarah. Sarah whispered, Do we follow him? Elena looked at the laptop. Then at the door. Yes. They followed. The man led them through a service corridor. At the end was an emergency exit. He opened it. Cold air rushed inside. Outside, a black government sedan waited. The man opened the rear door. Get in. Elena stopped. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Who sent you? The man looked at her. I was sent because of Daniel Cross. Elena froze. You know him? I know exactly who he is. Before Elena could ask another question, headlights appeared at the end of the street. A vehicle turned toward them. The man immediately changed. Get inside. Elena looked at the approaching vehicle. Who is that? Hospital security. The vehicle stopped. 2 guards stepped out. One shouted, Ms. Carter. Elena didn't move. The man beside her reached into his jacket again. This time he pulled out his identification. The guards stopped. They looked at the card. Then at him. One of them stepped back. Sir. The man said nothing. The guards returned to their vehicle. The card disappeared. Sarah stared at him. Who are you? He looked at Elena. My name is Marcus Reed. And Daniel? Marcus paused. Daniel is alive. Elena's eyes widened. You said that before. I know. Then where is he? Marcus looked toward the dark road. He's on his way. Elena shook her head. Why would a military officer care about a nurse who got fired? Marcus looked at her. Because you didn't just save a patient's life. He paused. You saved the life of a Navy SEAL. The words landed heavily. Sarah stared at Elena. Elena said nothing. Marcus opened the car door. There's something you need to see. He handed Elena a sealed envelope. She opened it. Inside was a photograph. Daniel Cross. Not in a hospital bed. Standing in a military uniform. Elena looked at the photograph. He was older than she remembered. Stronger. Different. But his eyes were the same. The eyes that had opened for a few seconds 4 years ago. The eyes that had looked at her before he lost consciousness. Elena turned the photograph over. There was a handwritten date. 4 years earlier. Then 3 words. Mission compromised. Confirmed. Elena looked up. What happened to him? Marcus answered quietly. His team was attacked. Where? Overseas. How did he get here? We don't know. Elena looked confused. You don't know? Marcus shook his head. Daniel was supposed to be extracted from the field. Instead, he ended up in my hospital. Yes. Who brought him? We believe someone inside the operation betrayed him. Elena looked at the photograph again. Why was his identity hidden? Because the people looking for him were still looking. Sarah stepped closer. In the hospital? Marcus looked at her. The hospital was never supposed to know who he was. Elena's face tightened. But Richard Hale knew. Marcus didn't answer. That silence told her enough. Elena looked out the window. So Hale was involved. We don't have proof. But you suspect him. We suspect everyone connected to the original records. Marcus reached into the front seat. He pulled out a second folder. This is why you're in danger. He handed it to Elena. She opened it. Inside were copies of Daniel's military medical records. There were photographs, reports, names, dates, and one document marked confidential. Elena read the first line, then looked at Marcus. Why is my name here? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Because your treatment saved Daniel. Elena looked down again. Her name appeared in the report. Nurse Elena Carter, critical intervention. She turned the page. Another sentence caught her attention. Subject survived against projected medical outcome. Elena stared at it. Then Marcus said, There's more. He pulled out another document. This was added 4 years later. Elena read it. The hospital had reported her treatment as unauthorized. The military report said the treatment was medically justified. The two records directly contradicted each other. Elena looked at Marcus. Why didn't you correct this? We tried. When? Years ago. And the hospital refused to release the original file. Elena slowly closed the folder. So they buried it. Marcus nodded. They buried you with it. The car became silent. Then Marcus looked at his watch. We need to go. Where? Back to the hospital. Elena stared at him. Why? Because Daniel is there. Her eyes widened. Now. Marcus nodded. He arrived 10 minutes ago. Elena opened the car door. Take me to him. Marcus looked at her. There's something you need to understand. What? Daniel doesn't know you're coming. Why? Marcus looked toward the hospital. Because he asked to see you himself. The car drove back toward the hospital. Elena watched the building grow larger through the windshield. For years, she had spent 4 years believing that patient had disappeared. Now he was inside the same hospital that had just fired her. The car stopped outside the main entrance. Marcus opened his door. Elena stepped out. The hospital lobby was crowded. Doctors, nurses, security, administrators. Then the automatic doors opened. Everyone turned. A man walked through. Tall, calm, wearing a dark military uniform. He didn't look at the hospital staff. He didn't look at the administrators. He looked directly at Elena. She recognized him instantly. Daniel Cross, the dying stranger from 4 years ago. The man she had refused to let die. He walked toward her. Nobody spoke. Richard Hale appeared at the far end of the lobby. The color disappeared from his face. Daniel stopped in front of Elena. For a moment he said nothing. Then he smiled. I remember you. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I remember you too. Daniel looked at the badge clipped to a security officer's belt. Then at Elena's empty chest. Where's yours? Elena looked down. They took it. Daniel's expression changed. He turned toward Richard Hale. The entire lobby became silent. Hale stepped forward. Mr. Cross, this isn't the place. Daniel looked at him. You're right. He reached into his jacket, then placed a sealed military folder on the reception desk. Hale stared at it. Daniel spoke quietly. But it is the place where this started. He looked around the lobby, then back at Hale. You should have checked who kept the original copy. Hale's face went pale. Elena looked at the folder. She didn't know what was inside, but Richard Hale did, and the look on his face told her one thing. Whatever Daniel had brought into that hospital, Hale was afraid of it.